So I just wanted to um, explain or just say that I wanted to do my journals in the presentation style of a Pechakucha, um, for the ability that I can be concise, straight to the point in all these kinds of things. Um, so that's how this journal will be. There's three parts, and um, yeah. So I guess I'll just get started here. This is the first part of the of my journals. It's the the readings we had online, and just how I engage with them, and just kind of what they're about. Um, if I was to write about it, that'd probably be another 40-page paper. But anyways, the first resources we looked at was the Dene Land and Culture-Based Education Resource. They This is about um, a curriculum that is based on four relationships with the land, spirit world, other people, and ourselves. They work very closely with the elders to create these kinds of things. That's why it's the Dene Kede. So these are examples of what they would do as a resource, as um, unit planning, as lesson planning. Those are the kinds of things talking about common mosses and their uses, drum dancing. This is the article from Willie Ermine, the Pedagogy from the Ethos. Essentially, he does the proper protocol in order to write down and the responses of the interview he had with, I think, with an elder, Mary, on mainly four questions. And then from those answers, he elaborated of how to teach Cree to the young kids, right? Young people have to start developing relationships with old people, the community. Dialogue has to be established and protracted. Even on the right side there, he explains a little bit more, but on the left side there, the pedagogy is a bit more specific. And then here's another list: language. Learning the Cree language cannot take place out of context. Teaching the language has to be done in the context of a community dynamic. This is to say teaching of the language within the confines of the classroom may be out of context, right? So now this work is starting to point into land-based education. The medicine wheel teachings by Lena White. Essentially, it's just the idea of the medicine wheel is just bringing out the point of having a holistic understanding, the spiritual, emotional, physical, mental. Um, and she uses medicine wheels for various examples and levels of what you can use, right? The medicine wheel perspective, getting started, program planning, curriculum development, achievement, right? Going to those levels, and then roles, responsibilities, in the practicum, right? Student teachers, principal, staff, and coordination, associates, right? So the next one, ways of teaching and learning Anishinaabewan, um, is pretty much integrating learning the language and bringing Indigenous knowledge into the classroom. One of the seven gifts were given by the Creator is language, right? So that IKS that they talk about, that Indigenous knowledge, um, and just kind of as a reference to Willie's, right? Land-based learning. That's the context that has to be learning the language. Land-based learning includes prior knowledge known by Indigenous people about the plants, medicines, animals of the land, respecting the sacredness of the land, particular places, involvement of elders and knowledge keepers. Um, those are all very, very important things because they're all interrelated, as we'll see in the articles towards the end. Land as Pedagogy, Leanne Beta Smoke Simpson, A Resurgence of Indigenous Political Cultures, Governance of the Nation requires generations of Indigenous people to grow intimately and strongly connected to our homelands. Um, so that's what this article is all about, just reconnecting, having that importance. Um, and the whole idea that there's an Indian method and there's the white method or whatever, and that's one of the points I highlight there. Um, so understanding that there's these different dichotomies that's happening: reserve, city, rural, urban. but all these things are trumped by being connected to the land, and pretty much our resurgence is from the land. All these things take place from the land. Land education, indigenous, post-colonial decolonizing perspectives on place and environmental education, why land education. It puts indigenous epistemological and ontological accounts of land at the center, right? Very similar to what um, Simpson was talking about, Aki, right? Kigawi, Aski, these are very, very important. Everything is essentially comes from the land. And what Willie was saying, the context, and that's the land, and the elders are coming through the land. Um, there's just more emphasis. The land is imbued with these long relationships. Understanding it through language, that's where it all has to flow through. Um, Relational pedagogies of land are not new. Indigenous scholars have focused much attention on the relationships between land epistemology and, importantly, ontology. Right, so land is our mother. This is not a metaphor. This is the reality. These are the things that we have to be brought back in the class. Um, right, even these chapters 5 and 6 from here just continue just to emphasize the importance of land, all the things that could come from the land, all those teachings, all those ways of knowing, and this is a strong response because of what the Western system has done, and they kind of navigate that a little bit. Land, indigenous spirituality, and healing that can only come from the land. Land, indigenous language, culture, language, and identity only can come from the land. Um, Natural world uh, is inseparable from the spirituality, from spiritual world. Chapter 6 really highlights the importance of indigenous eldership. Um, Talks about they kind of make some comparisons of what it's like for African elders and indigenous elders, but they are the keepers of the tradition. They hand everything, all that knowledge that's been taught to them for years and years, teaches them, and now it's the elders' point. Land as pedagogy is indigenous education, same thing. It has to come through. It has to come through the elders. They have to be the ones. They develop the curriculum, and but in the sense that they lead the curriculum, the realities of spirituality, the realities of what happens, right? So the reflections about all these writings is that a lot of this was made manifest during our culture camp. We were able to, and it was repeated often, that the spirits are the curriculum developers, that the language is the curriculum and how to understand these kind of things. In a ceremony I heard one time that um Christians have the Bible for their connection to God. We the Bible is our land, and the more I learned and read and reflected about these writings, is like it's we read the land. That's the manifestation of the spirituality. That's the reality of what we can't see. Um, one of the one of the articles even emphasized that idea that the land is the manifestation of our education. That connection, all those kind of things is all intertwined. All that kind of um, um, learning is so that we can come back to understanding that those levels, right? And even um, there's an example where there was a teacher talking, and then talking about protocols in English, but then they speak it in Cree, right? So the more you understand English and then you understand that language, that just adds to levels and depths of what is happening. And that's a place where we really need to get back to, and that's what I really want to try to do and figure out in my class. That cultural resurgence in North Central, those kinds of ideas. How do I do that? Bringing in elders to my classroom, taking them to the land, taking them to where the elders are, to the reserve or whatever. Um, yeah, a lot of what's been written is actually it documents the affirmations of the direction of where we're trying to head, I think, as educators. Um, the for example, I highlighted one part where they said don't step over a person's clothing, right? That was an old saying that's been handed down, but now that it's been talked about in a research journal, now it's an authority source. Now it can be talked about, and now it can be researched, and that's can be used as a resource. And so those kinds of things are what's really needed these days. And yeah, um, so stay tuned for part 2, the spirituality and ecology of the land. And this is my sources.